Question number 3. The 3 days and nights that are mentioned in Matthew chapter 12 and verse 40, would this have been Thursday, Friday, and Saturday? When you read Matthew chapter 12 and verse 40, Jesus is saying, just as Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of the great fish, so will the Son of Man be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth. The traditional approach to the timing of the crucifixion, the burial, the resurrection, the traditional approach says that Jesus was crucified on Friday, that he died Friday afternoon, he was put in the ground before sundown, which would have marked then the beginning of the Sabbath day, and that he was in the grave all of that Friday night, all day Saturday, and through the night on Saturday night, and then on the first day of the week he was raised from the dead. And of course, what the questioner is asking is, so where is the 3 nights? You can sort of kind of understand 3 days, a little bit of Friday, all of Saturday, a little bit of Sunday, but where in the world do you even get 3 nights? And there are 2 different approaches that scholars have taken to try to explain the timing of all of this. One of them, and I would, by the way, say that both of them are scriptural. Both of them will help you in their own way to explain the timeline of the crucifixion. But one approach says that he was crucified on Friday, as we just explained, in the grave before sunset, and that he rose on Sunday morning. The second idea is that Jesus was actually crucified on Thursday at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. He went into the grave then Thursday evening before sundown. So Thursday, and then he was in the grave all day or all night Thursday night, all day Friday, all Friday nights, all day Saturday, all Saturday night. Which again gives you the 3 nights. Again, there are arguments to support both of these views. We simply don't have the time to get into all of the weeds on both of these arguments. There are just reams and reams of pages that have been written to try to argue one way or the other. The short answer, those who say that it happened on Thursday, they will tell you that Thursday that year was the day of the Passover. Remember that the Passover was the 14th day of Abib, or later called Nisan. And just kind of like Christmas, December the 25th doesn't always fall on Monday, does it? Sometimes it's on Monday, sometimes it's Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, all 7 of the days of the week. Sometimes Christmas could be any one of those days. The Passover was the same thing, that it could have been any day of the week. And they say that Passover was on Thursday of that particular week, that Passover was not considered a Sabbath day, a rest day, but the day after the Passover, which was the first day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, that was a special Sabbath day. Sabbath doesn't always mean the 7th day of the week. Sabbath sometimes was a special day. The day after Passover was in fact considered a Sabbath day. They argue that John chapter 19 and verse 31 calls that day after he was crucified a high day. And so it was actually a Sabbath high day before the weekly Sabbath. And so it all kind of fits in there. And so that's the way they explain it. And there's a strong argument to be made for that. Those who say that he was buried on Friday, again, they'll go to passages that talk about the next day being a Passover, or rather the next day being a Sabbath, and they argue that's a regular weekly Sabbath. And so, again, it just depends. It depends on which way you want to interpret the Sabbath day. Was it the first day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, the day after Passover, or was it the regular weekly Sabbath day? It's kind of hard to decide one way or the other. Arguments on both sides. To a Western mind, that's you and me, Thursday makes more sense because we do get the 3 nights in there. What you don't get, though, is the 3 days. And so it takes care of the 3-night problem. It doesn't take care of the 3-day problem. Neither one of these approaches are going to get you a full 3 days and 3 nights like you might like to have. I think the better approach to this question is just ask, how would the Jews of that day and time in the first century, how would they have gone about understanding this? And the bottom line is that the Jews in the first century, they reckoned days from sundown of one day through the night and then through the sundown of the following day, evening and morning, the night and then the day, one day. You and I start at midnight, end at midnight. No, they started at sundown and it went all the way through until sundown the following evening. And so a evening morning idea is what the Jews held to. And they tended to, and there are several secular sources for this, they tended to consider a part of a day as the whole day. And again, you and I don't do that. Our Western minds don't think that way, but theirs did. Bottom line, if Jesus went in the ground before sundown on Friday evening, they would have considered that a full day, though it was just an hour or two. And then you have Saturday, and if he came out of the grave anytime after sundown Saturday evening, anytime during the night, Sunday, early Sunday morning, that would have been considered another full day. 3 days and nights by the Jewish way of reckoning. It's not the way you and I think, it's not the way you and I talk, but it was the way that the Jews reckoned time. I would point you to a couple of passages which we're not going to take the time to look at. If you're really curious, again, there's a gazillion pages on the internet all over the place talking about this sort of thing. You can look at Esther chapter 4 and verse 16, read through Esther chapter 5 and verse 1. Esther chapter 4 and verse 16, reading through Esther chapter 5 and verse 1. I would also point you to the book of Acts chapter 10. Acts chapter 10, get out a pencil and paper and track the timing of the days as Luke records in Acts chapter 10, the timing that's going on there. And you'll see that you probably aren't thinking of time the way that Luke records it in Acts chapter 10. So I just point you to a couple of biblical passages that illustrate that the way they thought about time, it's not the way you and I think about time. And so, does it really matter a whole lot? I don't think it matters a whole lot one way or the other. I don't know that there's any great theological significance. Some argue that there is. I'm not sure that there is. But the bottom line is that's a deep question. The person who asked it, I gave them, not reams, but I gave them many pages of documentation, and I said, go home and read it. I don't have time to talk about this tonight. So there you go.